Welcome everyone to the Seattle UFO Network Cosmic Reptilians Panel. It is a lovely honor to be able to host this. My name is Troy Bacon. I'm one of the coordinators of SUFON Seattle UFO Network. We are joined with also another coordinator, Carol, and I'm here hosting and talking with some of my friends and associates and kind of experts on reptilian beings and stories and knowledge within our universe and on our planet. And they have a lot of connections, personal connections to reptilian beings too. I have a story too to share. We are joined with Christian Sheena, and he is connected with I think I'm saying this right, Dragorn Collective.
The Dragorn Collective, yes.
Yeah, and so he's had experiences with reptilians and also Sasquatch and who knows, myriad of other beings, I'm sure, and a lot of us have too. And I'm also joined with my friend Andy Lai. We have known each other for many years now. We met at Evergreen State College, and I believe Andy is currently going for his license in is it
Master
East?
of Ayurveda. I'm actually going into a new form of medicine that is actually the indigenous medicine of a Draconian race. They're called sit-down medicines. This is like the medicine that teaches you how to be immortal.
Very fascinating. I'd love to hear more about that shortly in the panel. Perhaps later as we talk more about some of your services and offerings. Um, so we are doing this panel. I've been wanting to do this actually for a while, but hosting this reptilians panel, kind of to bring these experts on and also have these conversations around other people. This is not necessarily new. Other people have been talking about these topics and beings, kind of to raise awareness of benevolent reptilians and kind of the in-between and also the highly evolved reptilians, also sort of parallel to what some may deem malevolent reptilians or Draco and such, that have been talked about a lot in the ufology and ET contact communities. And so I know that a lot of people have developed this reputation in their minds of reptilians generally being kind of like evil and bullies and um, aggressive, some of them. And that's true for the probably 1 to 3, maybe 4% or so, I believe, that truly have demonstrated that. Those traits of aggression, of domineering, of what we call possibly terrorism and um, arbitrary takeovers of others. But just the same as how there are bullies on a school playground, or also in today's world, unfortunately, probably like maybe 1% of um, Muslims have become some of the more extremist terrorists and dark figures that we see. They've simply just splashed some mud on reputation, similar to how there are probably 1 billion or more Muslims on our earth, but who are very peaceful and who truly believe in the what I believe are peaceful and somewhat enlightening origins of what was originally Islam, but just as happens with religions, has been taken out of context by some over the years. And so we are now talking about I would say the majority of reptilians who are truly benevolent. And I also want to share a story that I experienced personally with I don't actually know what the queen looked like, but I had experiences with her offspring who were troublesome and I had to get rid of them, but I'll share that. And that's kind of a more malevolent reptilian story. But for now, I would like to welcome Christian and Andy and get into today's discussion about cosmic reptilians of all sorts. Let's go ahead with Christian. Um, I think you already had a story going and you are unmuted, so perhaps you can recap on that story of the.
Okay. No, we were talking about a film in the 1980s starring Dennis Quaid, and it was called Enemy Mine. And it's a sci-fi film, and it's about a war between reptilians and humans. And there are two starfighters, one's reptilian and one is human, and they're battling over this asteroid, and they both crash land onto it, and they're both stranded. And I guess the asteroid was able to sustain life. They're breathing through it, and they have to rely on each other. And throughout it, at one point, the reptilian he actually becomes pregnant and delivers birth to a baby reptilian and passes on shortly after. And it's up to the human who had become friends at that point to return that reptilian who was raised by a human back to his own people as a messenger of hope. And it was funny when I was thinking about this film. This film just popped up to me after you asked me to be on this panel, and I really feel like it's a film I haven't seen that film in probably 30 years easy. It was about mid 80s I think when it came out, but it's of all the representation I've ever seen in the media, I'm pretty sure that feels the most accurate. If we really want to see more of what it's really they're really like, that's a good place to start. So a highly recommended film to watch with an open mind, of course, to see the microcosm of the macrocosm.
I think it's yeah, probably a great synchronicity. Interesting that that came up for you and that you brought that up for this panel. Um, yeah, that kind of brings up different strands of um, story and information around reptilians we could talk about. And I guess that kind of brings up the genetic differences generally between humans and reptilians, but also the different types of reptilians I've heard that are out there. Um, would you say that, I don't know if you've heard of a lot of them, but would you say that quite a few of them, or quite a few of the types of reptilians can just self-procreate, or um, would you say
I
they're
have
more
no
for
idea.
male and female? Okay.
I have no idea, but my understanding is that many of them have both male and female and can procreate individually. That's my understanding. But I haven't had personal experience. Most of the experience I've had esoterically with reptilians has been through my artwork, and the beings that come in through my artwork. And when I connected with the dragons, I was pretty much told that dragons are a human term that have been used for them, and what the name I was given, I just kind of felt it coming through my heart, was the Dre, like DRAE dash Gorn, GORN. And when I got that name, it felt like I was tapping into the Akashic records. I got to witness their energetic race, almost like an air elemental, but they're in their air. And I got a memory of an asteroid coming to Earth to start an ice age and them trying to stop it. It was really amazing just to observe this. in my mind's eye, just through my heart, I just felt it came. I was watching this one being in the air, and all of these beings, all these other dragons were flying through him. And as they were, each one was flying through him, he kept growing and growing, like they were adding their energy to become one massive force through this one Dragorn. And there was just hundreds and hundreds just lined up going through him. He got colossal and came up and tried to actually stop the asteroid from coming to Earth, but it was too strong. It was too strong. They tried everything that they could, and it was too strong. It was just too strong. But it really showed me how much they care about our planet, life, how they were willing to stop a catastrophe on this planet. It really gave me a mind expansion that, like every other kinds of species, they're all across the board. You got the good, bad, the ugly. Well, this was some of the good.
That's good. And yeah, I'd say a lot of the stories, especially that I've been hearing over the past year or two, kind of hinted at dragons and reptilians generally having a benevolent nature and caring. And there's perhaps I should try to bring him on or see if I can connect with him. But there's one other very gifted, I believe, very ancient soul hypnotist and channel and energy worker I found on YouTube. Um, Perhaps I can link it up later. And anyway, he was describing some of his dragon lifetimes, and one going back to like primordial creation as a black dragon of the void, a protector of the void, and he was an amethyst dragon too, another incarnation. And so generally, I've heard that dragons actually are very in tune with and active with protecting and maintaining and participating in parts of creation of the universe, of other beings. Andy, perhaps we could hear from you about, perhaps you could introduce yourself and your connection with dragons and reptilians and your family and this planet.
Sure. I'm actually, to be honest with you, I'm a descendant of the long descendant of Huangdi, who is actually the Yellow Emperor, who you people call the first ruler of China. He is actually a dragon, an actual one, and my family are like living descendants that came from him. And people, you guys might have heard the tale when he left this earth around 120 130 years old. He didn't actually die. He got on his golden chariot that's just flown up on a fire chariot and up to the sky. That's basically what it is. And some of us are descendants of his, and I'm one of them. That's why I wrote on the chat that if anyone wants to talk to a real dragon, I am one of them.
So Andy, I'm curious how your dragon ancestors and family and also you have how they've kind of come through for you and how you learned about them.
Well, it was way back when I was 2 years old. Like because usually I had that ability to be able to see dead people at a very young age. I usually communicate with a lot of different beings. The first of the people who I met, and I didn't know this person, but later on in life I started to know. And I believe you know who how do I put this? Because in Christian tradition they call him Jesus Christ, but when I look at him, he's called Isha Nath in the old and ancient tradition. And basically he when I got to know who that person is and who are the Jews, like the original Palestinian Israelites, to my people, and it turns out these are called Yadavans, who are actually descendants of Lord Krishna, who also is a dragon, but he's more like a fish type being that came from India. And so they branched out 12,000 years ago to live in Israel today. That's how I also come to know that person, because Isha came to India and studied among the dragons, and he came back and taught to the West about Christianity and the original ways. That's how he was also the same man who raised me as a little dragon. And then I met my parents, who are, I usually dream of like these giant dinos a lot of times. Like they're huge T-Rex people. And so pretty much like that was my experience when I was 2 until I was 11, when I had to come here to the United States. It was like living with them is like living in paradise, versus like if I were to live in the United States, it's like a culture shock for me as a reptilian. Because to be honest with you, I do not believe in an ideology of individualism. Reptilians and Draconians like us, we have what we call a communitarian culture, a we culture. Like if you go over to Southeast Asia, go to India, go to any of the countries that in the southern regions, it's pretty much a culture where we live like, you'll notice like our grandmother, our great grandparents, our parents, our children, we all live together in one little house. And there's such thing as a clan. There's no such thing as like I versus everybody else in my family. That's like that's socially unacceptable to us. Versus like there's many other differences, like long-term orientation. We dragons, like when we come here to the United States, sometimes like when I come to the United States, I have a problem with Western culture. They act like as though like you guys think like 10, 20 years down the line in terms of businesses. Dragons and real Dracos, we think in terms of 300 years. If we do businesses, we don't think about the immediate profit. We figure out how does it benefit our group? How does it benefit society? We're the first people who actually taught the world about the triple bottom line. So it's a big leap for me living here in the United States.
I can understand that. I think I know myself, and I'm sure some other starseeds who may be on in the Zoom right now have had that feeling of just not resonating with the current cultures in America and the ways things are done here. And planet Earth too can be a huge culture shock for starseeds and interstellar souls. Um,
And the thing is I wrote on the chat is like, there's a lot of people in the West, they misunderstood the reptilian race. Like if you want the real benevolent ones and you want the understanding of the original, you have to read the Puranas, like the Hindu literatures of the Shaivist culture. Because Lord Shiva is the original god of the reptilian people. Lord Shiva. He's
yeah,
called the immortal god. And most of us actually are devotees of those of Lord Shiva.
yeah. I remember when I was in the China program at the Evergreen State College, we read there's a story we were studying, or a kind of myth or legend. Um, it was an old story, but it was basically about she's called a demon, but she didn't really want to be an evil demon. But basically a woman born as a snake. Um, Basically she was depicted as a top half of a woman, but from the waist down, she was basically a giant snake. You may have heard this, Andy, but um, she didn't want to even be a snake, or a demon, and so she actually spent her life um, devoting to learning how to transform into an actual human and do good for others. And so that's one example of how a lot of reptilians can actually have such a good nature. They don't they don't have a malevolent um, innateness to them.
Yep. And there's some things that people need to understand, especially because one thing that I will tell you straight up about being a reptilian myself is that when Christian mentioned about that film, about the what was the name of the film again? Enemy
Enemy
Mine.
Mine.
Okay, that film was inspired by an event that happened among the Lemurian people. And Lemurians are basically, they're your today Indians, like you're talking about Southern Dravidian Indians. These are fish people. And the Northerners are called dragons. These are your Southeast Asian people today. And I'm basically the ruler, the first founder of that empire. And my people, like, it was an actual act of war. By the Atlanteans. They literally massacred my entire continent. My people were all, most of us were dead. We had to go into hiding, and we literally had to completely. We were so angry at what happened, but the Atlanteans did. We retaliated against them. We couldn't take it anymore. So we bombed the heck out of Atlantis. That's why Atlantis has nothing left. And they're still survivors of the Lemurian people. That's why they're called Pandians. The Indians that you saw today in southern India that speak Tamil. Those are real reptilians. The people who still speak Tibetan, they're speaking Vietnamese. Those are all people of the Lemurian race. We're still alive.
Mm-hmm.
We're the Siddhas that you read so much that lived 3,000 years. Those are my people. I'm basically the people like I'm going back to my people to learn how do you do medicine the original way.
That's really awesome. Yeah, I know that. Yeah, with medicine and healing, I also believe that um, there's a lot more to it that's been forgotten, and some people are remembering that. Quite a few are. Um, I see that kind of a resurgence of integrative, energetic, holistic, and herbal and the natural ways being brought back into medicine scenes these days. And so that's valuable.
Yeah, but you guys gotta know, like, in order for them to like get to the point where you activate the herbs to the point where you can become immortal,
Hmm.
that this is why like there's a saint who is actually an actual saint in that founded yoga. His name is Patanjali. What you don't know, Patanjali is a Naga. He's one of my people. He founded the yoga tradition so that you guys practice today. He said that one of the few creeds that you have to know if you want to achieve immortality like the Nagas and the Draconian beings, you have to have reverence for God. You cannot run away from God thinking that you can just practice yoga and do whatever you want anymore. That's why, like, if you talk to any Draconian people who are benevolent, one thing that distinguishes us from the malevolent ones is that we have a reverence for God. We put God first. The moment we threw God out of our window, we started to become very dangerous and immoral. And like we're like demons.
Hmm. Christian, I'm curious also how your Dragorn collective or Dragorn beings have connected with you and how they come through, perhaps for your artwork and other parts of your life.
Um, Let me show one. This is Tanisha. And she kind of organically came about, and on her head is a tree of life.
Mm.
And this being sat in front of Devil's Tower on the equinox 2022 and absorbed the energies of Devil's Tower, which I feel is actually a tree stump to one of the great trees of the old world. So and that world, the world of the dinosaurs, where everything was 10 times, 100 times larger, even before the dinosaurs, those trees, and felt very connected. This one feels very connected to those worlds. Then I got this one here, Aragorn. He kind of came to me one day. Took me about a week to channel him in completely. It's got a kind of a stargate on his head. Um, these guys feel very benevolent. I have one that felt kind of questionable. I don't have him down here. I keep him outside my house. His name is an ancient one. And the way he came about was I was watching about the Bosnian pyramids. And I remember reading about carbon dating and that it was over 30,000 years old. They found a leaf between two slabs of stone, of concrete, in one of the pyramids. And I thought about the race of beings that could have inhabited that those temples. And what came back was lizard men. And this one, he could have been one of those clan. And he's a very interesting being. I got him right now in front of my house on my front doorstep. I have to say, I haven't had a single solicitation in 3 years having him out on my doorstep. So he's been a great protector of our house in that way.
Mm. I love that. Yeah, I've got to guard against those solicitors.
One last one that I got, because not all dragons are in the air. This is an underwater dragon named Spiritualina.
Hmm.
And she's kind of like a cosmic underwater dragon mother. Very, very, very beautiful, very special energy being. Eyes are rainbow. And very dear to my heart. They mostly come, they connect to me through these stones. And a lot of times I'll have dreams. When I was painting Spiritualina, I had a lot of dreams where I was just floating over an underwater city, gently floating down, and it was lights and all sorts of movement down there, like society. And I was just kind of floating down. And at one point, I looked over to my right, and there was one of these dragon beings to my right, and I kind of quickly woke up after that. But that's the kind of I'll be followed with a dream or a vision when I'm painting. And I should also mention, when I paint, I don't premeditate what I paint. I kind of take myself out of the equation, and just whatever comes first, that's what I go with. And they're just as much a surprise to me in the end as anybody else. So they kind of
Hmm.
form on their own, and that's kind of how I connect with them.
I like that. Yeah, I found that the more I've had experiences, well, with dragons, with reptilian beings of all sorts, and angels and other types of beings, their way of life and sort of way of being is very in the moment and in the present moment. They're not like humans that um, are frequently having their mind getting scattered across time and space and worrying about bills and having to accomplish this and that, and worrying about other people they know, and politicians they don't know, and celebrities they don't know, and all the stupid stuff they're doing that they doesn't actually affect their lives directly. And yeah, dragons and a lot of other beings definitely just live in the moment, and that's definitely powerful, but also important, I believe, for evolving as just a soul and a being. Um, you can't evolve if you're scattered and conditioned by other people and media.
True. I've dropped I dropped media about 5, 6 years ago altogether. For the most part, I breeze through Facebook here and there, and I really try to keep myself out of listening to any direct media, because you know what? Everyone's going to come to me and tell me about it anyway. So it's not like I'm going to miss out on anything, but I don't have
Hmm.
to hear it firsthand. I don't have to feel it firsthand, and I don't have to absorb it firsthand. And I
Yeah.
think for the awakening, that's it's a pretty it'll bring a lot of health.
Yeah. Just last night, as I was in sort of a half dreaming state for a bit, I was kind of coming to the realization that it's time that I basically unfriend and unfollow all the people I know on social media who are sharing pretty much nothing but just all these updates on either Republicans and Democrats or celebrities and politicians, and as if sharing about them is going to help the world or somebody. And I actually just recently did a Facebook Live starting to talk about this more, that doing all that posting about what these politicians are doing today and yesterday and using all these hashtags that a billion other people are using is really just feeding their astral and spiritual energy with that attention. And I really wonder what will happen if a billion people, even for a day or a week, completely black out of all sharing, stop it from them, and see how those celebrities and politicians change.
I think that would be beautiful.
Yeah.
It's funny. We talk about. I really don't want to get into politics. I'm just going to say one quick realization I had amongst all of this. A lot of people talk about like blue camp, the red pill, Democrats, Republicans, blue coats, red coats. It
Hmm.
came to me that, I feel that Mars and Earth was once a joined planet, and I believe it was named Tiamat, and it was severed. There was a catastrophe billions of years ago, and they used these two planets were the result of that catastrophe. Well, wouldn't you look at it? Mars is primarily red and Earth is primarily blue.
Hmm. Yeah, interesting connection there.
It's just ingrained. I think that is ingrained because it's ingrained in the planet's history.
Yeah,
So when we wake up to that, we can work with that without
yeah,
stepping out of that and being able to see it from an overview and have love and compassion and understanding as we see people so lost.
yeah. Definitely, I think it's important for everyone to start paying attention and being aware of if they're allowing political divisionism in their lives, because divisionism, even outside of politics, is dangerous. Um,
It's divide and conquer.
yeah, yeah, and it's really collaboration on the highest levels and unifying and helping others that is supporting evolution. Um, I want to talk a bit about my stories. I have a couple, at least, sort of reptilian related stories that I've had direct experience with, both of the malevolent and I consider highly evolved type. Um, I'll start with the darker malevolent story and how that came about. Um, I guess I've said this before on other I think YouTubes and other broadcasts and things, that I kind of consider my life to be ADA Alley, Aliens, Demons, and Aliens. And for a long, long time, it's kind of been that way, although as I daily do more like Reiki and light work and really just stay in the light, um, then it's more like it's less of the demons. And if they do come along, it's usually just a trickster or an imposter, and I quickly just sort of shoo them away, banish them from my my protected space. Or if they're causing trouble, then I'll call in more powerful help, perhaps with angels, and get them actually taken away somewhere else. But so it was really back even before I married the love of my life, and we kind of both have types of psychic and intuitive faculties, and so we were attracting these beings here and there unknowingly early on. And it was back in 2019 when we were still dating that we um we kind of started having these interferences with their communications. And it was like when we were on a phone call, um, especially I think it was mostly I would start hearing like crackling like really bad as if you're taking a candy wrapper and wriggling it against the speaker, and that was coming across and I couldn't hear her, and um, sometimes the call would drop too. Um, Various other things, I think some messages just wouldn't go through, or if they were sent, they wouldn't show up and things like that. But various other things. And there were other, even before that, in like late 2018, I think they were actually on this earth. Um, but there were, I was trying to be more serious about going to knowledge book council meetings when I started learning about the knowledge book and getting into that. Um, And I actually did want to do that because I felt there was powerful evolutionary energy in that. But I believe they were on this earth at that time in late 2018 because they were stopping me from even going to those meetings. One thing or another would come up and delay me or cause a challenge. And um, I eventually learned from another astral friend of mine who could look into this a bit more clearly. Um, Basically, that there was a queen that had come to Earth in 2018, and somewhere underground she had set up basically a nest. Um, I I never got a good visual or understanding of what the queen looks like. I imagine that she might have also had an iguana head, kind of an ugly iguana head. Um, my wife has always been naturally kind of clairvoyant, and I think these beings, they were probably in the physical to some degree, but cloaked. They weren't just astral. But she could see them, and so I believe that all or most clairvoyants have this ability to see into the ultraviolet wavelengths in which cloaking technology um, vibrates, and so they can be seen that way. And these beings were about as tall as us, maybe a little taller, but with iguana heads, and they were like the young offspring, really. Um, and they were actually pretty slow, but they were just sort of like there, coming and going, causing trouble, but not actually causing harm. And so that was the interesting part. Um, and so after I started learning about this queen and her offspring who were coming to us through, I believe, two different portals that I found and closed. Um, I then was connected with an ally on the planet Neptune, who was presented to me originally as a spirit guide. And I started talking to him back then. It was like the clearest and um, sort of most intense telepathic communication I'd had. And so then it was like, what was interesting is I'd talk with him and tell him about what's going on. He'd ask about the details of it, and basically, I had my eyes closed during these sessions, but what I what he's told me and what I felt and showed me is that he would send me basically a little orb astrally to like download all the details of what I knew and what was happening into the orb. And this happened a lot of like many sessions. He'd do this. Um, and then after the download was complete, it would just beam back to Neptune. And he would often tell me that he would consult with the other Neptunians about this, as well as in some cases he would say that he would have to present it to the angelic council. But what's interesting is this was happening for months. Actually, there was a time that um, physiological like blindness and deafness and changes were happening in like one kind of scary episode. Um, but recovery happened after that actually pretty quickly. But what was interesting is after I connected with my Neptunian, I think one particular time, these things just stopped. I think that literally the angelic council and this Neptunian friend, whatever they do, just took these beings off Earth. They didn't belong here and they weren't welcome anymore. Um, so that was the more malevolent type of reptilian I've dealt with. I haven't heard that people talk about the iguana heads, but yeah, reach out to me if you have encounters like that. Um, I do have experience removing beings like that. But otherwise, I've had more recent, although kind of few encounters with I guess it's just been twice with a being I know as Aileron, who he says is from the Andromeda galaxy, but I see him as an orange, scaly skinned humanoid reptilian. Um, and the way I saw him the first time, actually, I guess both times, is during Steve Nobel meditations. I don't know if anybody else in this group has experience with Steve Nobel, but he his channel just called Steve Nobel on YouTube, and he uploads these it's fantastic, mostly with the archangels, but some other gods and goddesses too, guided meditations and healings. And so they really put me into deep trance states, but in one of these trance states, I just saw this he had kind of a peaceful energy, although initially I actually saw the dragon energy. He also had like a serpent dragon with him, orange serpent dragon. But I saw him clearly, just with like actually human looking eyes, but scaly skin. Um, very interesting. And so he had something to share with me, a message. And so I tuned in, and it's kind of like an energy download, as a lot of these evolved ETs communicate through complex downloads. But if I could describe it in a word, the only word I could describe it as is validation. And those of you who might be in more of like the spiritual energy healing fields or experience with that, um, validation is something that most humans are lacking and don't have much skill in, is validating a lot of other people's experiences. And so I understood that actually as a lesson I needed to learn, and I've um, gotten a lot deeper with that, I feel, and to apply that better, validating other people's differences and experiences and opinions and things like that. But then the second time I met Aileron, he gave me another download that basically comes down to the kind of word and practice and lesson of consecration. And at first I didn't really understand how these two lessons can be related, but I recently have sort of put them together. Um, the understanding is that he was suggesting that I learn to consecrate more things in my life, consecrate my foods and meals, consecrate activities, consecrate um, perhaps YouTube videos and online posts and um, connections and activities, and kind of in the more ceremonial, ritualistic practices and traditions, the word consecrate is used sometimes with an anointing oil or substance, but not always. Sometimes it's just like a symbolic and gestural consecration, an anointing, uh, designation of something to give it a certain energy. And so, actually, what I've realized is that these two lessons of validation and consecration can be applied together, especially in relationships and relations with other people, is validating what a person says and simultaneously consecrating your response or interaction or behavior with them. So that's a tidbit of wisdom there from reptilian type. Yes, Andy, you're correct about that. Also, consecrate means to make holy. It is typically kind of a holy context, not just give like an intentional designation, but more like a holy, divine, spiritual application or blessing of something. Sometimes consecrated, quite often in rituals, consecration is used for an object that is then sometimes worn or used for a later purpose or type of magic, kind of to activate it. But yeah, consecration, in that context, the way I was taught it is also non-physical.
Ceremony. It's treating all
Mhm.
life as ceremony.
Exactly. And it is when you truly become activated and really connected and active as a soul, you might start to understand that all of your life and all of what's happening here is kind of like a playground, um, an experience to interact with from a soul level, and literally yeah, in a similar way, a ceremony. You can make life ceremonial from your soul.
Great healing indeed.
Yeah. So as we're kind of still in the first hour of the panel, Andy, do you have a response or perspective to share in that way?
Well, you've already, I think Alderon is the name of the dragon you talked to.
Um, yeah, I heard his aileron, but
Aileron.
yeah.
Okay, so to be honest with you, as a Draconian, let me tell you straight up, like, if anybody here, I don't know what religion you're from, but if you're a Christian, you want to understand what consecration is, go live in an Orthodox monastic order. You're going to see a lot of my people in the Orthodox lineage, like go live among the monks over there. Like each day before we eat, we have to pray the Our Father prayer in Aramaic. That's basically the original tongue of the hybrids between the Draconians and the people, and the human race. Because Aramaic is originally the tongue of the Israelites, and these guys came from Yadavans or from India. If you want the original tongue, go live among the Orthodox community. Go see how they pray over their food, and see how like each day when you go into their liturgies, you had to like kneel before the altar. That's basically how you what do you call it? Consecrate your meal. You had to surrender away what held you back. That's how you conquer your inner demons. That's why they asked you to do that.
Exactly, Andy. Thank you for sharing that insight.
Yeah, I know. I have to learn this too. And the thing is like that's something a lot of my family lineages, like we were founders of Buddhism. We were people like Nagarjuna is one of our own. He is the contributor of Mahayana Buddhism. The Lord Shiva, he's actually a Draconian. He's the founder of Shaivism. They all say the same thing: have reverence for God. If you cannot do that, you are far from living forever like us. That's the key to our immortality. And regarding like teaching some of the sacred arts on like how do you become immortal, I will tell you straight up, anybody who wants to learn from the Shaivist tradition or from my family lineage, you need to understand that as reptilians, one thing that unlike the West and maybe some parts of the Middle East, we are a reactive culture. When we look at people, like it's not just your words that determine if we're going to teach you or not. We look at your nonverbal communication. If you talk to us like as though like you're all distracted, like your mind's going, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. Do you know what my family would say? I'm not teaching you because your mind is running back and forth and back and forth. We can see it. We can telepathically know that you're not ready to handle what we're going to offer you. We're not going to teach it to you. And we guard our secrets very closely. We do not teach to anyone who's like very distracted is one, who's a criminal is two, who acts upon a sexual impulse that are very wrong is three. Any like think of the 10 Commandments. You violate one of those 10 Commandments in Christianity, we will not even give you the initiation, like period. But if you live righteously, we will give it to you.
Thank you, indeed. You know, what's coming to me at this moment is also kind of the tree of life teachings and the mystery schools and the Norse religions or Norse tradition. And Christian, I saw that tree of life on that stone you painted. I think that's relevant because one thing that's I think very pronounced in the Norse traditions that is valuable too in today's age and back then and kind of always is the importance of vows. And one of the um, rites and practices that basically you cannot break, or that is highly frowned on, that if you do break it, is a vow. If you take a vow to any particular way of life or a promise in life in the Norse tradition, then basically I understand that the serpent Nidhogger will be, they say, nipping at your ankles and gnawing at your feet, just as he's depicted as the serpent of the earth, kind of constantly gnawing at the roots of the Yggdrasil, the tree of life. So there's that importance, kind of a serpent and promise element there, sincerity. So yeah, really, I guess this kind of ties into, I think what's more prevalent in like the vast majority of reptilians in the universe. I don't want to say that I've witnessed is they're much more about sincerity and authenticity and intentionality, quite often a kind of like holy context of living. Um, and even I believe the what we call holy and sacred ways of living, they're taught by earthly traditions or traditions on earth, um, kind of is helpful to start evolution. But what I've experienced and the energy I've tapped into just briefly through my friend Aileron, there's like possibly hundreds of levels to consider for more of a spiritual evolution beyond just what the holy traditions of Earth might teach. Kind of like a gateway, a starting point, I believe, for humans. So we are an hour into the channel or not channel, Reptilians panel, and I feel that we've already covered a lot of territory. We have officially an hour left that was scheduled for the event. If people want to leave like in half an hour, that's okay too, or when you need to. Um, but I also want to open the floor to our guests and participants for a Q&A portion. If you want to raise your hand.